On Thursday, the 8th of August 1957, an envelope arrived at the home of a Samuel and Mary Tassel at number 11 Clayton Road in Langho. Inside the envelope it contained a key and a letter. And throughout the course of today's video, we are going to be talking about this letter and about what the contents would reveal. Mary fled the house to make her way to a family relative by the name of Joseph Proctor, who owned a local grocery store along Whalley Road. Inside, she demanded to see her husband Samuel. The three soon left this grocery shop to make their way back to Clayton Road. It was a 5-minute walk away, but along the way they would stop at number 6 Spring Terrace, and using the key they allowed themselves entry, and what they would soon discover would shock them to the very core. Upon gaining entry into number 6 Spring Terrace, and after searching the downstairs, the kitchen and the living quarters and finding nothing untowards, the three people made their way upstairs, and they soon arrived at the main front bedroom. Inside the bedroom obviously was a bed, and the bed frame itself had been covered with many sheets and bed furnishings. These sheets had been fastened to each corner of the bed frame. But it was only when they made a closer inspection of these bed sheets and this man-made canopy that a horrifying discovery was soon made. Under the sheets were 3 young children, seemingly asleep. But upon closer inspection, these children weren't asleep, they were sadly dead. The air inside this room stunk of gas. A floorboard close to the bed had been lifted, and the gas pipe itself had been split. It had been broken. The 3 children were Sandra Marshall, aged 10, Yvonne Marshall, aged 9, and Moira Marshall, aged 5. But there were no sign of their parents, 46-year-old Andrew Marshall and his wife, 38-year-old Elsie Marshall. Detective Chief Superintendent Lindsay was quickly brought to the scene, and along with many other police officers, he would start to investigate this location to find out any possible clues and as to what had occurred. Now, the road along Spring Terrace itself was quickly shut down. Curious bystanders came along to see what was going on. Mary handed over the letter she had received, which was postmarked Fleetwood, to PC Peel. And the contents, obviously the letter and the key, was also passed over. Chief Superintendent Lindsay, after reading the letter and seeing it was postmarked Fleetwood, he would send a bulletin to all local police stations as well as those further afield in places such as Blackpool and Fleetwood. And he would give a description of the couple to the best of the knowledge. This letter was the only clue that they had at this moment in time as to the whereabouts of where Andrew and Elsie Marshall may be. The descriptions of both Andrew and Elsie Marshall that was sent out in the bulletin went as follows. And Andrew Marshall was being described as being 5 foot 5 inch, slim with black hair, well trimmed with a wave at the front, long face, shallow complexion, hollow cheeks, clean shaven, wearing spectacles and either a fawn summer suit or sports coat and grey flannels. He has a strong Scottish accent. Elsie Marshall, now she was described as being 5 foot, very slim with dark brown hair cut short, pointed features, thin face, high cheekbones, believed to be wearing either red gabardine raincoat or brown herringbone tweed coat. Flat shoes, probably no hat, and she does not use cosmetics. Even passengers making their way to the Isle of Man from Fleetwood were to be checked. They were stopped at Douglas. The police felt that Andrew and Elsie Marshall may have fled the country. It was here on the 8th of August 1957 when that letter arrived at number 11 Clayton Row and to the home of Mary and Samuel Tassel. So the events that took place back on the 8th of August, well, they occurred here on Spring Terrace, now known as St Mary's Drive in Langho. But it was at number 6 Spring Terrace where those bodies of those poor little children were discovered. Now, number 6 is where the arrow is now, and the bedroom window where we're also pointing the arrow is the room where those poor little children were gassed by their father, Andrew Marshall. Now, as the hours went by and there was no sign of Andrew or Elsie, the police, like I said, put out further bulletins. Truck drivers from Cannock down in Staffordshire came forward, and especially one. And he said that he felt that he had seen this couple. But that description and the searches down in Cannock proved to be fruitless. There was still no sign of Andrew and Elsie Marshall. Before moving to Langho sometime around 1949, Andrew and Elsie had married in Scotland, and it was in Edinburgh that the two children were born, Sandra and Yvonne. The family had lived in a top flat house at number 16 Broughton Road. Now, Andrew Marshall, he was employed as a felt worker at the Blackburn Needlefelt Company. And whilst he did his job as a weaver in a professional manner, he also didn't have many friends there. One employee came forward and said that whilst he may have done his job perfectly and was never in any trouble, he was always on time, he was always diligent with his work. He also never socialised with anybody at work. He would hardly speak to anybody. One employee came out later and described Andrew as being somewhat of a moody man, moody in character, very hard to talk to whilst at work. But this couldn't be further away from the truth when the residents of Langho came forward, and they would describe Andrew as being somewhat of an intelligent man, somebody who could talk about almost anything. He was well liked, he was a bit of a bookworm, and he was also into his carpentry. And he used to be up for many hours into the early morning, hammering away in a little shed in the back of his garden, drilling away, sawing away. It was into his carpentry. It seems that during the last 6 months leading up to August, there had been no sound of hammering coming from the Marshall's house, and carpentry apparently no longer appealed to him. And not only that, Victor Belshaw, landlord of the village pub, he would later go on to say that Andrew Marshall had appeared to be very worried about the world's happenings, and he seemed to be a man with a lot of trouble on his shoulders. We know that the 6 weeks leading up to the discovery of the 3 children, Andrew had also been worried not just about what was going on in the world, but also about his future employment at the Needlefelt Company. There was talk of people going on strike, people losing their jobs, and this was also worrying Andrew immensely. As for Elsie Marshall, she had worked as a part-time nurse at hospitals within the district, and leading up to the discovery and the day of her children's deaths, she had been at work at Brockhall Hospital. It was following another appeal by the police that a taxi driver would come forward, and he would detail how he had picked up a couple matching their descriptions, and he had picked them up at Blackburn train station. Now, he would tell police that he had dropped this couple off at nearby Spring Terrace in Langho. It was on Friday the 9th of August 1957 that the inquest into the deaths of the 3 children took place, and the verdict would soon be made that these poor 3 children had died from carbon monoxide poisoning. Now, another witness, and that of a neighbour at Spring Terrace. She would mention that at around 11 p.m, it was on a Tuesday evening, she heard the children playing in one of the upper bedrooms. It was very late for the children to be playing, and she very rarely heard children playing at that time of night coming from number 6 Spring Terrace. So it seems highly likely that Andrew had kept his children awake to try to tire them out. His wife, Elsie, she had been at work at Brockhall Hospital. So it does seem highly plausible that Andrew indeed was trying to tire the children out so they would fall asleep much quicker from the effects of gas poisoning. It was during the inquest that it will be discovered that the family, Andrew, Elsie and their 3 children, they had spent a day over in Blackpool just the week before. And the children themselves had enjoyed a few hours playing in the sands just off the North Pier on the beach. And this is where another terrible discovery would be made on Saturday, the 10th of August, just a day after the inquest. 60-year-old John William Stillings, a mill worker off Penrith Road, Sheffield. He was in Blackpool on a well-earned holiday. And part of his early morning ritual was to take a pre-breakfast stroll on the beach close to Blackpool's North Pier. And it's here he noticed the waves breaking yards away from the promenade. It was there he noticed what looked like a body, but as the sea was quite rough, he was unable to be certain. There was also a young couple on the beach at that time of morning, James Morgan and his fiancée, Norma Lewis. Now, Stillings shouted over to Morgan if he could help him drag what he thought was this body from the water's edge and onto the sand itself. But the water was that rough, they had to abandon it. But more disturbingly, it wasn't one body, it was that of 2 people. And these people, this man and this woman, they were attached by a cord. Stillings then fled to a nearby hotel where an ambulance crew would be called for, as well as the police. Now, meanwhile, and just before the ambulance turned up, Samuel Salthouse, who was a beach patrol guard, he was on duty that morning, and he was assisted by PC Hayworth, who had also noticed this strange object floating in the water's edge. Salthouse and Hayworth managed to drag these 2 bodies onto the beach itself. With the bodies now being dragged inland, Superintendent Lindsay was called to the scene. And he was pretty certain now that this couple was the couple who they were looking for, who the police were looking for, in Andrew and Elsie Marshall. The descriptions roughly matched to the bulletin he had put out only 3 days prior. The bodies, they were attached by a long window sash cord, or resembling a window sash cord. Each body had this cord wrapped tightly around their waist, and then they were joined by another cord to each other. And it seems highly probable that this couple had tied this cord together and then slowly made their way into the water and close to where the bodies would later be discovered. Both the couple, the man and the woman, they were fully dressed, and it was estimated that they may have been in the water for at least 24 hours, if not longer. Now, within a few hours of their discovery, the bodies were later identified by a Mrs. Margaret Annie Bennett, Elsie Marshall's sister, and she lived in Pendle Street over in Sabden. Now, sadly, here at St Leonard's Churchyard in Old Langho, it is here where all 5 family members were interred, and it was on the 13th of August 1957. Now, the funeral itself was done in secret. Nobody quite knew the date and time when this double funeral would take place. I think at the end of the day, it was a tragic story, tragic circumstances. At the end of the day, a husband and wife took the lives of their 3 children. It rocked the foundations, not just obviously of Langho itself, the community of Langho, but the country as a whole. And there are other stories such as this, but further afield in Europe. But it is here in the heart of Lancashire, the northwest of England, in this little village called Langho, and slightly 5-minute away, Old Langho. It is here where all 5 victims are interred. Now, sadly, they are in unmarked graves. But Angela and Patrick, 2 of our Curious Creepers members, were kind enough to dig deep into the story for us and to locate the final resting places. So thank you very much, Angela and Patrick, for doing that for us. We really do appreciate the help. We have brought some flowers with us, and we're going to place them on the grave, and then we'll show you guys the plots themselves. And like I said, they are unmarked, so there are no headstones. But we do have a map. We have got it from the church registers itself, and it has pinpointed us exactly to where the family are now interred. So it's in this plot where Andrew, the father, and his youngest daughter, Moira, are now resting in peace. And to our right, on the next plot, this is the final resting place of Elsie, the mother, and Yvonne and Sandra, the other 2 daughters. And as you can see, there is no headstones. But it is strange how, when you stand here, and I'm not sure if the camera is picking it up, but there are outlines of where the plots are, and especially more so in Andrew and Moira's grave. There's a faint outline. So we know 100% that these are the 2 final resting places of the Marshall family. On Friday the 16th of August, and just 3 days after the interments here in Old Langho, a resumed inquest in Darwin took place on the deaths of the children. And it was a Dr. C.A. Hill, Home Office pathologist, who would say that all 3 children had died from carbon monoxide poisoning, probably during the night of Monday into Tuesday. We know witnesses, the neighbours, said they felt they heard, or they think they heard, children playing on the Tuesday evening. Now, obviously, it is hard to determine if that is accurate, especially with the Home Office themselves, the pathologist saying that it seems probable that they died between Monday night into Tuesday morning. So it's more likely that the neighbours heard the children playing Monday evening. The pathologist also would state that there were no marks of any violence on any of the 3 children's bodies. Mr. Hill was also asked at this inquest just how long it may have taken for these poor children to sadly lose their lives due to carbon monoxide poisoning. And Mr. Hill said it would have taken just several seconds for these children to fall asleep because of the adverse effects of the gas itself. But it would take several minutes before they would sadly lose their lives, and they would pass away in the bed where they would be discovered 2 days later. What makes this case really bizarre, peculiar, is from the outset it seems that the Marshall family were quite happy with their lives. There was never any bother, anything untoward going on with Andrew or Elsie, they were happily married, or so it seems. The children were always happy. They were always playing with other children locally and at the school. The teachers never had any problems with the Marshall children. So what went wrong? And what made Andrew and Elsie make the decision to take the lives of not just the 3 children, but also their own? Now, to tell that story, that would probably take another video in itself. So we're only going to touch upon the brief facts and that of what we know. And that is Andrew and apparently Elsie had become sort of obsessed with what was going on in the world. Now, in the 1950s, atomic bomb testings were going on. There was talk about the H-bomb here in the UK. And indeed, even Winston Churchill himself would give the go-ahead for more experiments to take place with the H-bomb. TV adverts were non-stop showing this propaganda, talking about the dropping of atomic bombs and a possible nuclear war, nuclear fallouts, the H-bomb. There was a lot going on in the 50s, and it seems highly probable that all this talk of another war, a new war, a more destructive war, was getting into the head, especially of Andrew Marshall. He had become somewhat obsessed with it all, but that obsession wasn't a good obsession. It was causing him nightmares, sleepless nights, and in the end, he had had enough. He could only see a future of destruction, annihilation, and extermination, as the press would word it. Elsie also would say the same, and she would write as much in the letter that her mother, Mary Tassel, received on the 8th of August. Dear Mother and Dad, this is going to be a great shock to you both, but in view of all the things that are happening in the world and the talk of new wars, which will mean extermination of masses of people and especially children, we decided we could not allow this to happen to our children. Sandra, Yvonne and Moira are outside all of this, and no harm can reach them now as they lie forever peacefully together in bed. Andrew and I did this because we love each other and the children, and would hate the very idea of our children would be left to have to face in the future what other children faced in the last war. I hope you will not condemn us for our actions, but rather see it from our point of view, and if you feel it in your heart, you will understand why we have taken this action. There is one thing we can say truthfully, that the children certainly loved you, and our last wish is that our children should be cremated. Mother, Andrew is asking if you'll put some of the flowers picked from your own garden with them. This is goodbye, and remember, we love you too. Andrew and I are going together and will probably be picked up together, and our desire is to be cremated together, if possible, with the children. There is no other motive or influence, and Andrew and I have been happy in our association. Love to you both, Elsie and Andrew. P.S. I am enclosing a key, but please, Mother, don't go upstairs by yourselves. We would like you to have the coffee table and the sewing cabinet. The letter we've just read is word for word, which Elsie wrote to her mother and which was delivered on the 8th of August, and what we touched upon at the very start of this tragic story. And as you can obviously tell, it does appear that Andrew and Elsie did indeed love the children. But something deeper was going on in their minds, in their heads, and they were convinced that there was no future for, not just obviously themselves and the children, but for mankind as a whole. The words extermination, annihilation that have been used in the letter and by the press to describe this case, that tells you everything you need to know as to why Andrew and Elsie made the decision to take the lives of their children and obviously take their own lives. Even to this day, and as Vicky has touched upon, It goes on to this day. The press, the media, it's full of what is going wrong in the world. It's full of conflict, wars, talk of possible nuclear weapons being used. It's frightening, and it does get into your head somewhat. And Vicky will probably tell you, I'm as bad as anybody when it comes to reading the news daily, seeing what is going on when it comes to, you know, what's going on in like Ukraine, Russia, Israel, Gaza, and all these other countries where wars are going on. I'm the first to read them, and it does get into my head. I can kind of see where, or what Andrew's thinking was back in 1957. I don't agree with it. At the end of the day, he may have acted alone in murdering his children by fracturing the gas pipe, but Elsie was complicit. She went to work that evening knowing what her husband Andrew was doing. She was part of it. So neither of them are innocent in any of this. They committed murder on the 3 children. Was it an act of mercy? Some will say possibly. I don't agree with it. I understand Andrew and Elsie were frightened for the future. I understand they didn't want a future of upheaval, wars, possible use of nuclear weapons, but it still doesn't mean you take people's lives, and especially children, and more so your own children. The judge himself had heard that this crime was committed out of pure love for the family, for the children. And he would tell people to stop talking like that. At the end of the day, in the eyes of the law, this was murder followed by suicide. And he would give an example, and he would say that supposedly Andrew and Elsie had taken the neighbour's children into the bedroom that night and gassed them. Would people be saying it was an act of love then? No, it wouldn't be. It would have been murder. And this is exactly what he would tell the jury. Yes, it's a sad story, and I do understand where possibly Andrew was coming from, as I've just said, but I don't agree with it one bit. Now, Vicky, what do you think?
Oh, see, that's a difficult one for me.
Can you see where Andrew and Elsie were coming from?
Yeah, I see how they've murdered them because they've done it in a nicest possible way. They're asleep, so the kids aren't aware what's going on. They've gone peacefully, in a way.
They've never been harmed physically.
No.
They were loved. But it's still murder.
As a mother, she knew. I just don't know how a mother could do. I still don't know how a mother, especially a mother, could do it. I've always said that.
The judge himself also went into detail about, obviously, the night it happened. And he said that Elsie would have come home from work, changed out of her uniform, got changed into a normal casual wear. Like, yeah, it's done.
Yeah.
You know, was she empathetic about it? Was she sad about it? Obviously, we'll never know. But it was premeditated, as you just said. And she knew full well while she was working what Andrew was doing. She could have stopped it at any time. Andrew could have stopped it at any time.
I blame the media.
For getting into people's heads.
It's the media right at fault, and it's still going on today.
But Andrew and Elsie are still culpable for what they did and what they planned.
But okay, I know a father's different, but that Elsie carried those children.
Yeah.
And I'm sorry, no matter, probably all the women out there, you do not hurt your children, even if you think you're trying to protect them. If you're trying to protect them and there was something coming, you'd all be huddled together.
Yeah.
You just don't do it.
Yeah. Tell us what your thoughts are down below, guys. Do you think this was an act of love, or was it plain murder? Was it selfishness as well?
I do think they loved them. I do. But it's just not what you do.
It's not the way to do it.
No.
But comment down below, guys. Tell us your thoughts. Was it love? Was this done out of love? Was it selfishness? Or was there something else untowards that we may not know about? Be interesting to know your thoughts down below. That is all from this really nice, quaint churchyard here in Old Langho. And we hope you've enjoyed the story. We know this is a tricky one to get your heads around. It's took myself and Vicky, and I would say Angela and Patrick, some time to digest what we've read and what we've gone through. And it may take you guys some time to also understand fully what occurred back in 1957. And as Vicky said, it's a difficult one because you protect your children at all costs. What is going on in the world is frightening, even to this day, as it was back in 1957 and in the 1950s. But to take the lives of your own children, it is selfishness. That's the way I look at it. So to take the lives of the children, it's difficult to comprehend and it's difficult to put into words, but it'd be interesting to know your thoughts down below. So we're going to leave Old Langho churchyard behind. Do hope you've enjoyed the video. Like I said, I know it's a hard one to digest. But if you did enjoy it and you enjoy these kind of stories, this type of content, please don't forget to share this video and all the others on the Days of Horror YouTube channel. If you can, subscribe to the channel. We do appreciate that as well and all the support you guys give. But most importantly, please comment down below. We do love the interaction and we do love to know people's opinions, thoughts on the stories that we cover. But in the meantime, guys, as I always say, we want you to take care, look after yourselves, and we will be back soon with more tales from our dark, but at times glorious past. Stay safe, stay curious, everybody.